Cops and other law enforcement people of Reddit, what were some cases you worked on that made you think, even if for a moment, that something supernatural paranormal was going on? EMT here. Once had a call at our local mall. Show up and an 8-year-old was having breathing problems. Her mother, aunt and cousin had just been caught stealing and it was late at night. We assumed the breathing problem was stress induced. Once we got into the back of our unit, she looked my partner and myself in the eyes and said that she lived at a bad place. She said she lived with demons, and I shit you not, as she described the demons, her heart rate plummeted to 90 BPM to 45 BPM in a matter of seconds. My partner and I looked at each other and immediately started trying to lighten the mood and preparing for a code. She ended up being okay. I will never forget that experience. Edit. Yes, once we had her stable. Police were definitely involved. My medic contacted CPS as well. When I was in Afghanistan on guard duty, I turned to see this huge panther in the middle of a farm field. The thing must have been 30 feet long. My heart started pounding like crazy and I just about radioed it in. Then I realized my nods removed depth perception and I was seeing a normal cat about 5 or so feet in front of me on the guard shackleage. My dad used to work as a correctional officer at Goulburn Jail in Australia, which is probably one of the oldest and hardest prisons there. A story he tells of his time there is one I always remember. He said that the whole place was creepy anyway. Not helped by some of the inmates at the time, including the notorious Ivan Millet, on which Wolf Creek is based. Anyway, first thing he noticed was that dogs would outright refuse to enter the prison. He said they couldn't get them past the gate no matter how hard they tried. But the creepiest occurrence was one night when they heard the sound of running booted footsteps. Everyone was in their cell so they couldn't figure out what was causing it. Next thing, all the doors of the open and unoccupied cells on the top floor were banged shut, one after the other with loud clangs. Then they see the source of the running noise. Now dad swears this is what he and his colleague, so he has another witness, saw. Apparently they looked up and saw what looked like disembodied hobnail boots run down the aisle right over their heads, banging as they went. Dad decided to stop working in the prison not long after this. Super creepy. Cop here. Partner and I were dispatched to welfare check. Elderly guy. Nobody had seen him in a few days. Mail overflowing in mailbox. Missed a doctor's appointment. Car hasn't moved. etc. We both know we are about to find a body. We arrive on scene and can't get anyone to the door. Look through the window and sure enough, we can see his foot on the floor in the living room. My partner is a corporal and pulls rank and makes me go first. Door is unlocked and as soon as we open it we smell a mostly fresh dead body. Almost relieved. We both enter and he tells me to check vitals on dead dude. He is obviously dead, with lividity, dried feces on him and dried saliva around his mouth. So I go to stand over him and see if I can get a pulse, at which point he takes a deep breath, rolls over, and asks why we are in his house. At this point we both start screaming oh sheets and what the ducks as we both run out of the house. We called EMS and they transported him. Said they couldn't get a blood pressure or pulse on him. I think he died a week later in the hospital. I still get jokes about raising the dead. I am a CNA in a local hospital. One of my patients just had a quad bypass, open heart surgery, and I went in to check her vitals. The room was dim and the hall was quiet. I'm looking at her and in the corner of my eye I see something drop from the ceiling out of nowhere. It makes a big clunk sound and I turn to see what it could be. There's nothing there. At that moment my patient looks up at me and say my dad's here, passes back out. I finish my job and leave. When I would go to that floor again as a floater I would hate to go into that room. I work in a pre-Civil War town that has lots of antebellum homes that survived the war. Ghost hunters have been to the town on several occasions. There is this one antebellum mansion that is more of a museum, that gets alarm calls semi-frequently. Every time. The side door to the house is open and the kitchen has all cabinet doors and drawers open. Every ducking time. The caretaker says it's been happening since she started looking after the place about 30 years ago. We don't clear it without backup. Not a cop, but was told this by a cop on the night shift a couple years back. About 3 in the morning. The sound activated alarms at the local school were triggered. The reason? They picked up on small children laughing. The cop gave a big note to that call and just half-heartedly shined a spotlight on the area from his moving car. Not my story but my husband's. He is a correctional officer and was working the night shift. He told me that around 2 almost 3 in the morning he had to do rounds and do counting. As he was passing a cell he said he heard an inmate bang on the cell door and scream help. He ran back to the cell, told the tower officer to open the door. As he shines his light in the cell, the inmate that is housed there wakes up asking if everything is okay. It left him confused for the longest time. My husband no longer works the night shift. I was a cop for about 5 years and worked for a boss that used to tell this story all the time. Just a warning. This story contains self-harm. So don't read if that will trigger you. When he was a rookie and got his first car, they mostly walked back then. He patrolled his district and decided to check out this cemetery area. Kids often went back there, as it was near a skate park, to do extracurricular activities. As he drove up, he saw a person who had hung himself from a tree. He immediately called it in and the scene was properly investigated. Well, the weird part is, the next night he became curious, so he went back to the same area. The tree was gone. The city had not put in any work orders to cut the tree. The city I worked for did not do that type of thing, as it costs money and the city was too cheap. There was also no stump in the ground. There was no place the tree could have gone. He was in that spot for about 6 or so hours during the investigation, so he was familiar with it. It spooked him at the time. Obligatory not my story. But when I read this I thought it was pretty ducked. An elderly lady phoned 911 and requested that they send some policemen down to her house because she saw a shadowy figure lurking in her backyard. She was living by herself at night and didn't feel safe watching someone through her window. When the policemen arrived, the door was unlocked. They walked in and found the lady seated facing the window and they went to go check the backyard. There were no signs of anyone attempting to break and enter and nothing was missing. She had very tall fences surrounding her property, making it nearly impossible for anyone to get into it. They did, however, find footprints on the inside of her home. It was quite possible that she had left the door unlocked and wasn't looking outside, but rather at a reflection of someone inside of her home, behind her. Not a cop, but I used to work private security. For a bit I worked at a shopping mall. My partner and I already had a feeling this place was haunted. One reason being the homicide that happened right before I was hired. The very west of the mall made the hair on my neck stand up the most and I don't know why. It's also good to note that there is an animal shelter at this end of the mall. You can see the cats and dogs through the windows at night. They would bark and whine a lot. One night I was walking to that end of the mall and I started feeling like someone was following me or walking behind me. When I got to the shelter none of the animals were making noise. But I swear to God all of the ones that were awake were staring at or behind me. I got really bad goosebumps and a horrible feeling in my gut. I put my head down and walked as fast as possible out of the closest door. Once I was outside all of the negative feelings went away. My brother is a cop and there was a weird house in the city he patrols. It was a super old house and had a dirt basement where human skulls and bones were found. And after that all sorts of crazy shit just happened. Every family who moved into the house immediately tried selling it back or just fled and wouldn't go back. The city had enough so they just bulldozed the house and planted a garden or something. I forget the name. But the house had a name like the Jenkins house or something. But anyways, there's a plaque now at the garden that just says this is where the Jenkins house used to sit. Edit. Just figured I would add this in my main comment. But I did some research and I guess a book and TV show were done on this house. The show is called A Haunting and the episode is The Unleashed if anybody is interested. Bridgeport, Connecticut during the 70s had a notorious haunted house on Lindley Street. The family that lived there reported furniture moving, stuff levitating, and the cat talking. Tons of PD and fire witnessed it firsthand when they were sent to investigate. Pretty cool story to look up. The house still stands and is occupied today. I'm hoping to never hear that address over the air. Ever. It's probably too late for this to surface. But this is my dad's story. He went to a call where a father had gone crazy and decided to shoot his family. He killed his wife and was looking around trying to find his 5-year-old son to shoot him. The boy had run outside and was trying to hide on the side of the house behind the trash cans. The father eventually found him and point blank emptied nearly a full magazine at the boy. When my dad arrived, they found the boy in shock, hiding right where his dad found him. Not a wound on his body. There were bullet holes in the side of the house all around the boy. When they finally got to question him about it, they asked him what happened when his dad found him on the side of the yard. The boy replied, "The angel was in front of me with a shield. And he saved me. He pushed the gun away from me." I'm not a cop. Nor law enforcement, so disregard downvote, I don't mind. But I was traveling with some mates in the Greek islands. We'd been in Ios for a couple of weeks and always felt 100% safe. You could leave your life savings, which wasn't much as a backpacker, on a banana lounge and it wouldn't get touched for days. Anyway, there was a wet t-shirt comp on and we were up the front discerning the quality of the competition, and all of a sudden I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Almost like I felt sick. I was dead certain something bad was going to happen. Anyway, I moved to the back and started watching our stuff. It took maybe 10 minutes and someone came past and swiped my mate's bag with everything he had in it. I chased them down and got it back. Till this day, the only way to describe the feeling was supernatural. I'm a believer of something else. What? I have no idea. But that was a pretty weird experience. Not cop, but military. My unit was having some training exercises in some jungle somewhere. We were going down a river in these little motorboats when someone realized we were one man and one boat short. So we go looking for the guy. Eventually find his boat down some side fork of the river. No sign of the guy whatsoever. There wasn't anything that indicated that he might have gotten attacked by a croc either. He just went poof. Never found his body. No scraps of uniform. No blood. Nothing. For all we know, he got nabbed by some native tribe and suffered death by snoo. I know an old detective who has lots of stories. One of which he loves to tell as a paranormal one. In his younger days, 2 patrol officers found a woman in white wandering around a graveyard barefoot past midnight. They asked her what she was doing and she said she was lost. So they brought her back to the station. At the station, this detective was on duty with his partner, who handled the woman's case. His partner took down her details and let her go. The detective I know never saw her face. Only his partner did. But he remembers seeing her back as she walked out of the station, and for some reason she was tiptoeing as she left. His partner and her ID or name through the system after she left, and apparently she was supposed to be dead. Not a cop, but I do overnight security in a hospital. One night we got a call from the operator that someone was making phone calls from an abandoned part in the hospital. Now this part of the hospital has absolutely no one in it whatsoever during night shift, so it already raised some red flags for us. I should also mention that whenever I do rounds in this section I always feel like someone is watching me. Anyway. So we get the call, so me and my supervisor head over and check out the entire area. Check all doors, closets, etc. Eventually my supervisor opens this lone closet and sees this weird looking voodoo like doll propped up in the closet with an old school dial telephone in the closet with it. The next night the doll was in a different location.